very important to organizations to have a positive user experience. And again, not all of these providers out there have a very strong user experience. So 60% said this is a must-have. And the user experience goes far beyond the user interface. Includes areas like customer support, innovation, the speed and delivery of the product, and things that might be a little more innovative, like mobile recruiting. And what we really saw from the providers that we looked at is a lot of improved user experience features. So things like providing RSS feeds or providing the option to send a job to a friend if you're a candidate coming to look at a site. The Web 2.0 features that are so popular right now, wizards. We're seeing a lot of advancements. Most of these providers are adding user experience, improved user experience to their product roadmap for next year. So it's again, as companies are asking more for their providers are responding and meeting their needs. So there's a lot of talk out there about the talent management suites. I'm sure you've all probably heard it at some point or not. And we hear so much about it, how important it is to have a talent management suite. But what you can see here is that what we found in our research is that the majority of talent acquisition customers are really not considering the full suite. It's still very siloed from talent management. So the integration is more critical than having it all from just one provider. So that's really what we're seeing in the market, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So again, consider the heritage of your provider. We talked about that. Most of these providers have their roots and have started in the talent acquisition market. So really gives you an idea of the providers we looked at and where they fall. And it might explain why this is such a highly saturated market. So you're thinking about purchasing these solutions. You've gone from your list of 20 to now 4, your short list of 4, and now you're doing some more demos with narrowed it down to 3 and negotiating and looking finally for your partner. So at this stage, what is really important to companies, which they'd be considering? Well, certainly the product strength and aligning with business needs and the heritage. We talked about all that. This is a great time to bring in your IT department, and it's a mistake if you don't, because you need to think, again, about that integration. You need to think about the current systems that you're already using on the talent management side, or any systems you're using as far as an HRMS or ERP goes, or background check providers or assessment companies. There's a lot to think about there, and your IT department has been involved with all of those implementations, so you need to keep them in the loop here. Experience. So the customers, you want to make sure that they have a solid customer base, and also that you're able to talk with those customers and it's the right cultural fit. The domain expertise, again, so that this isn't a provider that's necessarily just launched a solution. This is someone that has experience in this area, that has a good track record with customers and has been around for a while. So again, that length of time. The strength of their services. So if you need those implementation services, if you need customer support, if you need some compliance services, you want to make sure that they have those or that they partner with companies that can provide those services to you. And then meeting global needs. Again, if you're a global organization, you need a global provider. So there's just no way around it. The architecture, the delivery model, if you need a SaaS model, if you need an on-premise model, next generation features, and then service-oriented architecture. So really figuring out what you need as an organization and making sure that your provider has what you need. Customer satisfaction, so not just through those customer references that your provider sends you, but also taking it a step further and finding other customers to talk to. The completeness of their vision. It's always okay to ask for their roadmap. They might share it, they might not, but it's worth trying. And then the cultural fit. Again, this sounds like a very fluffy thing, but it's so important, and seeing many organizations, especially at the enterprise level, how important it is to have the right cultural fit. staying power, again, we talked about that, but there's a lot of factors there, and you need to do a little bit of research on these providers, especially when you get down to the short list. So again, once you've selected the system, that sounds like it's a difficult task, and it certainly is, but what about implementation? And implementation is so challenging and can sometimes take so much longer than you expected as an organization. So really, what's involved there? Well, first, organizations need to define their own business needs. And this takes time. You can't go into this blindly. You need to think about it. You need to think about your organization. You need to make sure you have support for this. You need to figure out your own processes before you even think about implementing the system. And then you can bring in at the next level, at this design level, you can bring in implementation services. But organizations need to be realistic about the time frame, and they need to be transparent, both internally within the organization and also with your provider. Again, that's why that cultural fit is so important, because the implementation can take a long time, and you need to be able to feel open. And that's when you're designing the solution, you're meeting with all different locations, business priorities, you're setting those, and really thinking about how this is going to work in your organization. And then configure test. So if you're a global organization, you need to think about things like local compliance issues and local configurability. You need to think about your implementation team, both internally and also if you're going to use your provider for implementation services. And then all your stakeholders as well. And then the pilot phase. So companies like Yahoo, how important this is to have this pilot phase where you're testing it out. And what companies like Yahoo did is they tested out just certain basic functionality in this pilot phase to one business unit rather than all that advanced feature. So making sure they work out all those kinks with the basic functionality in one business unit before rolling it out. And then in phase one, so then really looking to roll this out. So what are some of the implementation challenges? And I think we have a poll here too. Patrick, if you would mind launching this one. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see it for some reason, so I'll have to take your lead when it's ready to close.
You see the poll there now, and it says, what is your greatest implementation challenge? System did not support all requirements, system had errors, global challenges, or our processes were not well defined.
Great. So you can see here what we found, but I'd love to hear from you what your greatest challenge was when implementing your system. And we'll just leave it open for a couple more seconds before we close it. Great. If you can close it now, Patrick, that would be great.
Okay, great. We have 22% selected system did not support all requirements. 7% selected system had errors. 19% selected global challenges, and 52%, the largest percentage, said our processes were not well defined.
Great, thanks, Brent. And that's really, I'm glad organizations can recognize that because, again, that's going back to the first step in those implementation best practices is making sure that your processes are well defined. And I think a lot of times it's very easy to blame your provider for implementation, but the onus is really on the customer to make sure that you understand your talent acquisition strategies, your processes before implementing these systems. So it's so critical, and if you haven't figured it out before, it will certainly come up during implementation. So just a little bit of information on global implementation. So what are some of the recruiting expectations, some of the job boards, and the social networking sites that are popular in different parts of the world? So we know what happens here in the United States, where we have the big 3 job boards and some very popular niche job boards. We have the Facebooks and Twitter and LinkedIn. And we know what our expectations are around finding quality of hire and cost per hire. But here, this is gives you a glimpse as to what's happening in Europe and Asia Pacific and the Middle East. So some cases in point. So what are some best practice companies doing, and what did they learn through